You are familiar, of course, with Amazon.
Like the delivery.
Yes.
Yes.
And you are familiar, of course, with its service called Alexa.
Yes.
Alexa was named in honor of the Library of Alexandria.
Oh my gosh! Because it had all the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yes.
shame. Jeff Bezos, you're a shaky human being, but that's clever. I'll give you that. Hi everyone, I'm Valerie.
And I'm Ken.
And we are the Facts and the Curious, where we discuss all the juicy, meaty, and succulent facts that we're all a little curious about. But for today, we're going to be spicing things up a little bit.
We are. So in our previous episodes, all two of them, we've talked about different kinds of animals.
Mm-hmm.
We are expanding our horizons a bit. And today we are talking about the late, great Library of Alexandria.
And I love libraries. My favorite movie is Matilda, as you know, and she goes to the library, and ever since I've been a kid, I've been fascinated by them. So I'm really excited to hear what you have in store for us, great professor.
Well, thank you. Well, I'd like to switch it up a little bit.
Oh.
And ask you a question.
Okay.
As a child of the continent, what did you learn about the Library of Alexandria in school as a child?
I am actually quite embarrassed and quite ashamed to say we did not learn about the Library of Alexandria.
Then we are kindred spirits. We also did not learn about the
really?
Library of Alexandria. But it is famous enough that I would hazard a guess that just about everybody, at least in this country, is passingly familiar with the library. At least they know it was an ancient library, it was very large, and it burned down.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and if you don't know, now you know.
And if you don't know, spoiler alert, the Library of Alexandria is no longer with us. And that is a very large part of its story. You know, I was at the library recently looking at our, local library, not the library recently, looking for books about the subject. And it's not hard to find nonfiction books about the Library of Alexandria. But I was really surprised to find that by a factor of 2 or 3 times, our local library has more novels about the library than it does nonfiction books. The thing about the Library of Alexandria is it occupies this really unique place in sort of our collective conscious, because we actually know for certain very little about this library, and yet it's so famous and was so massively influential. You know, I think there's something really compelling about this idea of this giant library, this monument to human knowledge that was so influential in its heyday and then was allowed to burn. That's a compelling story.
It's a sad irony.
Yes, and the fact that we have so little knowledge to fill in the gaps has let like creative minds kind of run wild and try to do some of that work. So there's a lot of myth around the library. Perhaps the most famous untrue myth about the Library of Alexandria is that it was destroyed in a single tragic fire.
It wasn't?
It was not. We do not know precisely how or when it came to be destroyed, but it was not one fell swoop, one big fire. I'm going to be talking a lot about that today. I love the shocked look on your face.
I am so excited. Yes. You have no idea.
I'm really excited about this episode. Okay. This is really interesting.
I wish I had a blanket to snuggle in.
So, may I?
Yes.
Okay. Alexandria, the city, is on the Mediterranean coast of Egypt.
Yes.
It's 111 miles northwest of Cairo.
Okay.
It was founded and named after Alexander the Great, after he conquered Egypt in the year 331 BC. Egypt at the time was under Persian rule.
Oh, that homie was everywhere also.
He was absolutely everywhere.
Goodness.
In any case, a few short years after this happened, Alexander the Great dies.
Right.
And he dies very young. He dies so young that he has no obvious heir.
Hectic.
And so he leaves behind the largest empire the world has ever seen, extending from Greece to India.
Wait, how does he die? I'm sorry?
We don't know precisely how he died.
Really?
There are stories of his death where it seems that he had some kind of fever. The most popular theories are either that he had some kind of mosquito-borne illness like West Nile virus or malaria. There are theories that he was poisoned, but there are other theories as well.
Okay.
But he was only 32 when he died.
He was 30. He was your age.
He was my age
and
when he
you're
died.
A baby.
And I have not accomplished anything quite so close as to amassing the world's largest empire.
Thank God, also.
So, there's this massive and powerful and wealthy empire that he leaves behind, and no one's quite sure what's going to happen to it.
Yeah.
And to make a long story and a lot of violence very short, it ends up getting divided in 3 pieces among some of his generals.
Oh, snap.
With each of these 3 generals taking a piece of the former Macedonian Empire.
Jeez, okay.
And the portion of the empire, which included Egypt and also a couple smaller areas, parts of what today we would call Libya, parts of what today we would call Syria and Israel and Palestine, end up under the control of a man named Ptolemy the First Soter.
Stop!
Are you familiar?
I've heard the name Ptolemy quite a bit because also with my seminary class and stuff.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
So this part of the world becomes known as the Ptolemaic Empire.
Yes.
And it is probably Ptolemy the First Soter's idea to build a massive library in Alexandria. He moves the capital of Egypt. Traditionally, it was in Memphis. He puts it in Alexandria. And it's probably his brainchild to collect all of the world's books. Every piece of literature, every scientific document, every book from all around the world, the goal is to collect them and translate them in the Library of Alexandria. Now, this probably wasn't accomplished, the building of the library, until the reign of his successor and his son, Ptolemy II Philadelphus. And a third man who likely played a very large role in the library's founding was named Demetrius of Phalerum, who was the governor of Athens for 10 years, but found himself exiled from the city, winds up in Alexandria, and is in charge of procuring much of the library's earliest collections.
Wow. Can you imagine, though? Like, just being on a pursuit of knowledge from around the world.
Yes. It's such obviously impossible, but what a wild and incredible idea.
Right.
And the Library of Alexandria was kind of one of the first places in the world where all knowledge was considered equal, no matter where it came from, no matter who wrote it. They had texts, we think, originally coming from Jews, from Elamites, from Babylonians and Assyrians and Chaldeans and Syrians and Romans and Phoenicians and Indians and Persians. All in one place. Back up here. I have more notes than usual.
Right.
Because there's just...
I love it.
I know.
This reminds me of that episode of The Last Airbender, where they find that library that's under the sand with the owl.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting his name, but...
oh no.
I know!
He Who Knows 10,000 Things.
Yes! But what's his, ethnic name?
Yeah, I know. Oh no.
It's gonna kill me.
He Who...
I feel like it ends with an ooh sound.
He Who Knows 10,000 Things. Wan Shi Tong.
Wan Shi Tong.
Yes.
That's it. Yeah.
Yes.
Oof. Okay. That's what it reminds me of. Is
Yes.
This library.
Now, we don't know a lot about the architecture of the library, but it was likely based on, somewhat, the Library of Aristotle. Aristotle built one of the earliest true libraries.
Okay.
And Aristotle had a student named Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great's one of his heirs, of course, goes on to found this library.
And just to comment on that, I love history so much because you realize that everyone just knew everyone.
Yeah, you're going to hear some more familiar names in a little bit.
Oh my gosh. It's like finding out that C.S. Lewis and what's his name?
J.R.R. Tolkien, yes.
were like besties.
Yes, they were,
It's bizarre. But
yes.
Go on.
So, the library did not stand alone. It was part of a larger academic complex called the Museon.
Okay.
Now, that name comes from the word muse. It's the literal meaning is a monument or a temple to the Muses, who were the Greek goddesses of literature and science and the arts. So it's part of this larger Museon, which that word, if it sounds a little bit familiar, it's the root word of the English word museum.
Stop! Oh my gosh. I love museums. I've worked in and with museums, so that's just like...
Yes.
It's like all my favorite things.
Now, we do have some accounts from scholars who visited the Museon, and they, they wrote about what they saw in the area and the place where they studied. And kind of confusingly, some of them don't really mention a single great library. Oh. So, trying to piece that together, it's possible that the Library of Alexandria was not a single four-walled building like we would expect a library to look like today.
Okay.
In this time and place, the Greeks were they were really into this style of learning that Aristotle invented, called it's called peripatetic learning. Ooh. And that is a Greek word that basically means walking about. Oh. So the way...
like how they just stroll...
How they would stroll through the city.
That was like a way of learning?
That was a way of learning. And so we know that the library or the Museon contained colonnades, which are covered walkways supported by large columns. And so it's possible that the library was really just kind of a set of alcoves set next to these colonnades with shelves containing many scrolls, where a scholar could just pick one up and go on his way, reading the scroll as he walked around.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if libraries today were like that? No one would return the scrolls. I wouldn't. I'd forget.
Now, at some point, the library sort of runs out of room and spawns a daughter library. So there's a second smaller library. It's called the Serapeum.
And it's like a different location?
It is nearby, but in a different location. And it also contains, back in this time, in this place, books, like bound books, don't exist. So all of the volumes of the library are on papyrus scrolls.
Yeah.
If you don't remember from your history classes, papyrus was the first sort of paper-like substance invented in Egypt, coming from the papyrus plant, which is endemic to the Nile Delta.
I'll find a little picture.
Yeah. Yes. We'll be talking a lot about papyrus.
Oh,
it's critical to the story of the library. Kind of a fun little anecdote here. This library obviously did not exist in a vacuum. And there was competition. There were other libraries around the world that were rival libraries to the Library of Alexandria. They want to have, everyone wants to have the best books and the best scholars studying there. The most notable rival library to the Library of Alexandria was called the Library of Pergamum, which was today we would call the place Turkey.
Oh, so before Carol Baskin and Joe King, there was Pergamum in Alexandria.
Yes, constantly competing to be the better library.
Right.
The Library of Alexandria actually, through this rivalry, indirectly contributes to the invention of parchment, because Alexandria as, the world capital of the papyrus trade, refuses to trade papyrus to Pergamum. And so,
that's rough.
And so they have to find something else to use as a writing medium.
That is so childish.
And end up inventing parchment.
Well, good for them, because that was some childish nonsense. Imagine getting, like, blackballed from paper.
From the paper trade.
Right.
Oh. Yeah, but, I mean, papyrus was an absolutely critical resource.
I can imagine.
Now, there are a lot of different academic pursuits happening in this library. It's, the capital of the world at this time in study and in knowledge and in scholarship. And so here are just a list of some things that are happening at the library during its heyday.
Oh, sorry, meow meow.
So as far as topics, scholars are studying math, astronomy, medicine, grammar, literary criticism, translation of texts, standardization of poetry forms. They are working on library cataloging, engineering, and cartography. So here are some inventions.
Cartography?
Yes. So here are some inventions that happened at the library.
Okay.
There's this guy named Archimedes.
Stop it.
And at the library, he invents a device called the Archimedes screw, which is a very early water pump. There's a very accomplished inventor. His name is Hero of Alexandria.
Okay.
Some of his inventions at the library include the very first steam engine.
Hold up. Can you give us some dates?
I cannot give you any. I did not put that in my notes.
Oh.
This is all BC.
Steam engine.
Yes.
BC.
Yes. His steam engine was not it was very basic, and it was kind of just for show. It wasn't doing anything really practical. But he was like moving like pieces
it started
with
somewhere,
steam. It started somewhere.
That's incredible.
He also invented something called the automaton theater, which was it was this device that self-propelled. You didn't have to constantly put energy into it, but it's sort of like a little mini theater with little figurines and stuff, and they would move around and tell a tale. This is considered to be the earliest forms and like the beginnings of robotics.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Yes. And another thing that this man invented was the wind wheel. So think about the exterior of a windmill, the actual wheel that's being pulled by the wind. This is an invention by Hero of Alexandria.
All these years
ago.
Wow.
Moving on. A man named... I'm so sorry. I am going to be pronouncing a lot of Greek names, and I have done my homework to try to learn how to pronounce these, but I might still mess up. There's a challenging one coming up.
That's okay.
It's unfortunately it's all Greek to me.
I told him not to say that.
But I did. Ctesibius, I think, develops a pipe organ.
You mean the instrument?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
They were playing it back then?
Yes.
This changes just like my own mindscape of what music sounded like.
Yeah.
Because you always think it's like, I don't know, more percussion-y.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, these are very early inventions that would not look extremely similar to what we know of today. But the origins of these things all go back to the Library of Alexandria. A man named Aristarchus, I hope, invented the very first heliocentric model of the solar system, almost 2,000 years before guys like Copernicus and Galileo.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How did they know where was what and what was where? Did they have like telescopes and things like that?
Oh, did they have telescopes? I'm not sure that they had
So they
telescopes.
charted the stars, and
They
they
charted
knew
the
which
stars.
ones were like planets and things.
Yes, absolutely.
By just looking at the stars.
Well, by keeping track of how they moved across the seasons.
Oh, of course.
Stars have a certain pattern coming back,
Yes.
and planets don't obey that as nicely. So they
Right.
had a good understanding of that.
And I guess they also didn't have all the light pollution we have today, so they could
True.
actually see planets at night.
Building on that, a man named Eratosthenes, I believe.
You're doing great.
Thank you. Oh, man, I'm trying my best. He accurately calculated the circumference and the tilt of the Earth.
How, Sway? No, that I refuse. He must have had a vision, because how are you just going to,
I couldn't begin to describe it,
But he did it?
but he did it.
What math are we actually learning these days? Because they were out here just coming up with how to calculate the tilt of the Earth, and we're here struggling through calculus.
A lot of the math that we learned today was developed at the Library of Alexandria. Trigonometry, in particular, was massively expanded at the library.
Really? And
Yes.
I love trigonometry. Oh, loved it.
What else? Oh, the same guy, Eratosthenes, invented the idea of using coordinates on a map to refer to places. So, like latitude and longitude lines. He decided that we needed a better map, and so he started adding like this coordinate system.
Imagine just deciding that.
And it's helped us to discover ancient sites because we would have his maps.
Oh my
And he would have
gosh.
locations called out with latitude and longitude lines, and we can like.
What a magnificent man.
Yes.
That is incredible, having such an understanding of just like geography.
Yes.
Oh, what are we doing?
Now, despite all of that, the single largest and most important field worked on at the library was literature.
Of course.
So, one of the important things that was happening, it's such a different time and a different context. When the library was founded, these are Greeks, and the author to them was Homer. And so the Homeric works they looked upon much like we would look upon the Bible today.
Do you want to explain what that is?
Homer's epic poems, like the Iliad and the Odyssey. But again, with such a different context, there were not necessarily definitive editions of these texts. So first of all, back then, there's no printing press.
Right.
The only way, if you want to duplicate a text, is to copy it by hand.
Jeez, okay.
And so, you may have a bunch of copies of these different texts, but, being copied by hand so many times, they might not necessarily all be identical. There are errors introduced during the hand copying process. The texts that they had to work with, some of them were very old and damaged, and so they might not have the whole thing available to them.
Right. And how common was it for like someone to be literate? Like, were these people just kind of like really select elite kind of,
So the
groups of
scholars
people?
of Alexandria, for certain, were an elite group. I'm not exactly sure how common literacy was
Okay.
in this part of the world at this time. But one of the jobs of these scholars was to take, all these different editions of these works and synthesize them into a definitive edition. And it's because of them that we're able to read these major texts from ancient Greece
I see.
like we are today.
Okay. So this place really was just kind of like one large university.
I'm so glad you said that.
Oh, you're
I'm going to
welcome.
come back to that.
Okay.
And obviously Homer isn't the only person who they're doing this with. It's a very large and in-depth job, and a very important job at the library to take all of these texts from all around the world that they're obtaining and translate them into Greek and form this definitive edition, because all kinds of works back then maybe were damaged, maybe had errors in them, and they had to figure out what the text should actually say. Alexandrian scholars developed new genres of poetry. A man named Dionysius wrote the first book of Greek grammar.
Oh, wow. I bet that was a text.
Apparently, it was only about 50 pages long.
What?
It was the standard of... So this has survived. And it was the standard of Greek grammar for over 1,000 years after he wrote it.
Oh my god!
But when he wrote it, there wasn't a standardized grammar.
Oh,
So imagine, like, the form and the pronunciation of every different letter.
right.
And, just like, the structure of a sentence, the conjugation of verbs. There wasn't a standardized document.
Huh, so they probably used this for like translating the Bible and stuff.
They used it for all kinds. It was taught in schools
Wow.
all the way through, I think, the 12th century.
Wow.
So not only is this like vital to the Greek language, but this document becomes the basis for the Romans' Latin grammar book, and through them then becomes the foundation of the like standardized grammar of all Western languages.
Oh, wow, because Latin-based languages.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
You know that conjugation crap I had to do in like, well, I guess 8th grade, as you'd say in America, for my French class was because of this, dude.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the Bible. Mm-hmm. The Library of Alexandria is where the official Greek translation of the Old Testament happens.
The Septuagint.
The Septuagint.
I learned
Yes,
that in
it's right there in my
seminary.
notes. It's right there.
I can tell you a thing or two about the Septuagint,
That's
but
right.
I'm going to just let you
So
do your thing.
they translated it at the Library
Of Alexandria?
Yes.
Stop!
Yes. So I didn't put this part of my notes,
Because
but
that's basically the version, rather, of the Old Testament that the early New Testament Christians would have used. So
Yes.
like St. Paul and Peter and Jesus
yes.
would have used the Septuagint.
Yeah, so the story that I don't have in my notes, but I'm going off of memory, is that the head of the library at the time wrote to a top priest in Judea, requesting him to send some of his top scholars to translate their Hebrew texts into Greek. And that priest sent 72 scholars, 12 from each tribe. Is that?
Well, there were 12 tribes.
Oh, 12 tribes.
Yeah.
So 7 from each tribe.
Or 6.
Six. Math is hard.
It's okay.
Six from each tribe.
Uh-huh.
To arrive in Alexandria and jointly translate this text. The legend is that it took the 72 scholars 72 days to translate the Septuagint. Another genre of poetry invented at the Library of Alexandria is called the erotic epigram.
Wow, people have been horny since Alexandria.
The inventor's name is Asclepiades, I think.
That's a name.
It is a name.
Kind of sounds like an STD.
I actually have one of his poems here.
No way.
In this style, translated in English. I'd like to read it for you.
Go ahead.
I think it's really good. And boy, just the idea of reading this ancient person's poem calling out to us from 2,000 years ago in a different language, and that we have it today is just amazing. I'm going to read you this poem now. Didyme waved her hand at me. I am utterly enchanted. The sight of her beauty makes me melt like wax before the fire. What is the difference if she is black? So is coal, but a light it shines like roses.
He dipped in the chocolate fountain? Once you go black, you don't go back. Look at that poetry that he uttered.
Well, you know,
What can I say?
Alexandria was a multicultural city. It was one of the most major cities on the Mediterranean, and it was in Africa.
Right.
So people from the Middle East to Africa to all across Europe visited this city.
Bizarre.
Yes.
That is a poem, also.
Isn't that a poem?
Oh, that is a
Wowee.
poem. I'm a poet myself, and I envy people that can just like write something so profound and beautiful in just a couple of like lines. That is incredible.
Yes. So I mentioned that estimates for the number of scrolls in the library range between 40,000 and 700,000.
Yes.
This doesn't give us a very good idea for how many unique texts were there.
Does not.
It does not. Because, a single work might span across multiple scrolls.
Oh, yes,
Or,
that's true.
or a single scroll might contain multiple works. This is... one of the things that they were trying to figure out is where to put breaks in text, like the different chapters in say the Iliad and the Odyssey weren't necessarily there in the original text, and so they're breaking it, they're finding these natural breaks to separate.
Right.
And additionally, there were certainly duplicate copies of a lot of texts because they're bringing all these different versions together, coming up with an official version. They certainly had to make copies over time. Mm-hmm. So they don't necessarily have one single copy of every work. There are duplicates. So we don't really have any kind of idea how many unique texts were in the library.
Okay.
They had some pretty interesting methods of acquiring texts for this library built to house all human knowledge.
Oh boy.
So they did, of course, send people out to purchase books at markets whenever they found them.
Right.
There were some slightly less above board methods of acquiring texts as well.
Because it's a mafia.
It's very common to read stories about how every ship that docked at Alexandria, which was a lot. This was a major city and a major port city at the time. Every ship that docked at Alexandria was searched for books. And if books were found on board, they were confiscated by the Library of Alexandria, and its scholars would take them and copy them, and they would then keep the originals in the library and return the copy to the ship.
Oh, that's kind of sweet. I mean, it's still horrible, but it's at least they were, trying to, in their own piratey kind of way, sharing knowledge instead of just stealing it,
Sure.
certain countries did with certain artifacts.
Now, of course, copying a text by hand, depending on its length, is not necessarily a swift job.
Yeah.
And there were certainly some ship captains who simply had to leave to meet their schedule before they received their copy. But that, in fact, it's said that any document that made it into the library this way had a special tag on it that read "from the ships."
Oh, okay. At least. So they had, referencing and stuff.
Yes.
Even way back.
Yes, they did. Now, here's another fascinating story that's told about the library's acquisitions. Athens, the city-state, held official copies of some ancient and renowned plays.
Plays?
Yes, they're original copies by the original playwrights.
Okay.
And man, the Library of Alexandria wanted these bad.
Oh boy.
So they traveled, they sent scholars to travel to Alexandria, and they requested to borrow the copies of these plays, and said that they would take them back to the library, copy them, come back, and return the originals. And the Athenians agreed, but they asked for a deposit. They asked for 15 talents.
Which was quite a bit.
Which was nearly a half ton of silver.
They were shrewd.
Today this would be worth millions and millions of dollars.
They knew what they had.
And so the scholars of Alexandria take these texts back to the library, and they copy them.
Okay.
And they keep the originals and bring the copies back to Athens and say you can keep your deposit.
No! They also knew what they had. So you're telling me everyone knew how priceless these were?
Yes.
Also these Alexandrians need to relax. It's not that deep. Every day is not about just swindling people and being crooks. Like the irony of being the center of knowledge and yet also being so corrupt. Wowee.
Now, you mentioned something earlier that I said that I was so glad you said.
The university thing?
Let's bring it back to that.
All right.
So, the library was not just a collection of books. It had some other things surrounding it and within it. Some of the amenities for the scholars of the Library of Alexandria, in addition to the library, were a dining hall, housing, private study areas, meeting rooms, lecture halls, and gardens.
So it really was a university.
It is absolutely the model of the university that modern universities still use today.
I feel like this is like who Harvard thinks they are. You know? The Library of Alexandria. That is incredible.
Yes.
Oh, can you imagine just walking down like the university or the library like pods, and this person's inventing poetry, this person's inventing maps, this person's like calculating the tilt of the earth, this person just came from robbing people on a ship. You know, it's like such a modge podge of
Another just interesting little anecdote here. Speaking of corruption. If you found or translated an ancient text from a famous author as a scholar, there's a lot of money in it for you. And so, this attracted scholars who maybe were not quite as interested in academic honesty as they were about that paycheck. And we know that during this time, there were scholars who would either take a work from a non-famous author and translate it and copy it and slap a famous author's name on it for a bigger paycheck.
Oh my gosh, that happened to certain books of the Bible too. Yeah, where they'd be like, I'm a big fan of Paul, so I'm just going to write a book and say Paul wrote it.
Some scholars would even simply write something brand new and put a famous author's name on it.
So it's literally like how people today, like, you know how you always find the bootleg version of the Avengers or something? It's like that, but...
Academic dishonesty goes back a long time. Now, let's get to the really sad part of the story. Obviously, the library is no longer with us. But I've already told you that the myths about its destruction are not so accurate.
Right.
So let's talk about what happened. The library was in decline for a long time, perhaps starting in approximately the year 126 BC. The latest Ptolemy king, Ptolemy VIII Physcon, was dealing with some unrest, and as a result of this unrest, he ends up exiling all of the scholars.
What?
Yes.
How does that help anything?
I don't know. I wasn't able to dig into this really deep, but under his reign, the scholars of Alexandria end up exiled. And obviously, afterward, like, more scholars come back.
So it's kind of like when Elon Musk took over Twitter and got rid of all the coders?
Yes. The beginning of the end, so to speak.
Right.
Now, there's obviously the story of the Great Fire. The library likely burned at least 3 different times.
Okay, and you said that there were multiple locations too. It wasn't
just
like a big building.
Exactly. Wow.
I've been
Perceptive.
listening.
Getting to the things I'm going to say before I say them.
We're married.
So the first major story about a library or part of it burning comes from the year 48 BC. And there is a civil war in Egypt.
Okay.
The Ptolemy king has died. And there's debate about which of his children should take over.
So it's like the beginning again, where Alexander the Great dies.
It is.
And there's like...
history just kind of
It's just
the same
a
thing.
cycle of life.
So one of the siblings is Ptolemy the 13th Theos Philopator.
Wow, these names. All right.
And then he's competing with his sister,
Oh.
Cleopatra the 7th Thea Philopator.
Stop.
Now, I
Do
said...
you mean like Cleopatra?
I said Cleopatra the 7th. Cleopatra the 7th is the Cleopatra.
The plot twists in this story. I thought we were just talking about books. So Sissy Cleo comes through.
So these siblings are at war for the throne. And a man named Julius Caesar intervenes
Escándalo.
on behalf of Cleopatra.
Okay, Juju, what is he gonna do?
And in the fight, Caesar burns the Egyptian fleet, the ships,
Oh.
at the docks.
Why was Julius on Cleopatra's side?
It's a good question.
Okay.
I don't have a great answer for you. I believe Cleopatra asked for his help. And as sort of an early version of a world police kind of concept, the Romans tended to intervene.
So they were like the U.S.
A little bit.
Okay. You know what I mean.
So Julius Caesar burns the Egyptian fleet
Okay.
in the harbor at the docks, and the wind spreads this fire into the city.
Oh no! So it wasn't even like an intention. Not that would make it better, but this is kind of even worse.
And the fire burns. What the story is that 40,000 scrolls burn. We believe that this was not the library proper burning, but a storehouse located near the docks that contained scrolls and was used by the library. Now, it's not at all clear what these scrolls may have been. They could have been new acquisitions by the library on their way to the library to be translated and copied. They could have been new copies generated by the library on their way to be shipped out.
Yeah.
They could have even been blank papyrus scrolls.
Okay.
We don't
we
know.
Really just have no idea.
We have no idea, but it does seem pretty certain that a large number of scrolls in this storehouse burned as the first major fire related to the library.
It just says a lot about war as well, doesn't it? Like, apart from the obvious tragedy of the loss of human life, how it just impacts, like, so much of the future and loss of culture and knowledge and, like, actual, like, resources that would have been helpful in human development, and it's all gone because someone had a temper tantrum.
Yeah. Cleopatra ends up being the last ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom.
Right.
And after her rule, it is absorbed into the Roman Empire.
Oh, is it? Hectic.
Now, this is not a great thing for Alexandria or its library. Alexandria had been the capital of a wealthy empire, and now is an outpost of a much larger empire.
Yeah, it's not the same.
It's not the same. It's and Rome at this time is not doing great economically. So under Rome, the city of Alexandria enters decline, and the library kind of follows the fate of the city. Rome doesn't provide the library with the resources that it really needed. It's underfunded under Roman rule.
It's always the education and the arts that go first.
Yeah. So
I bet the army was eating.
funding is cut, and the the salary offered to scholars is reduced. The admission standards to the library are changed. You no longer have to be one of the best scholars in the world. The Romans now offer spots in the library if you're a cool politician, if you're a good soldier, or even if you're a really talented athlete. That's surely something.
So nothing has changed.
Something that no modern university would do, reserving a coveted place at a high-ranking university for an athlete. Would never happen today.
An athlete or like someone who's popular.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
So glad we moved past that era of history.
Oh my gosh! So see, this is why it's also so disheartening to hear stuff like this, because this was thousands of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So this is never going to stop. You know what I mean? It's never going to end. Wow, education is just going to keep being treated as a joke by those in power.
So I might have missed the year here. The year is 30 BC, when Egypt falls under the control of the Romans. So as the writing is on the wall, so to say, for the Library of Alexandria, and as it declines, some of its scholars go to other libraries. And as they move, they take some of the scrolls with them.
Right.
Or as other libraries rise in prominence relatively, some of the scrolls move to other libraries. All that is to say that the library burned on multiple occasions, not one single fire, but the burning is kind of the least important part of the tale of its destruction. It's probably a pretty familiar series of events, thinking about a public institution being underfunded, being placed under the care of maybe not the most careful people.
Yeah.
And one last thing about the library and about the sort of the critical component of the library. Papyrus is not paper. They used it as an early form of paper, but it's fragile and its shelf life is very short.
Right.
So a papyrus scroll you can reasonably expect to last maybe 100 years. Under pristine conditions, maybe 200 or 300 years, but it behooves you over the course of a human lifetime to copy your papyrus scrolls, because they simply don't last that long.
So did parchment last longer?
I don't know how long parchment lasts,
Okay.
but I think it probably lasts longer. But, imagine this great library with likely hundreds of thousands of scrolls, and each one of them needs to be copied once every human lifetime.
It's impractical.
That's a lot of resources,
Yeah.
a lot of manpower, a lot of funding to accomplish just the upkeep, just the maintenance of your collection.
And even just like the development of like language over the time as well, what I mean? Like there's a chance that the next copy won't be translated as, correctly.
So there's a sense in that the size of the library helped to spell its doom.
Oh, wow.
In addition to the Roman Empire not providing the necessary resources to upkeep this collection.
It just got almost like the Roman Empire itself. It got too big to sustain.
History just echoing and rhyming.
No choice, but to crumble. Just like the Roman Empire, no one knew who was running it half the time.
Yeah.
It changed hands. There was betrayals. There was this, and people really don't change, do they? Wow, only God changes people, as I like to say.
Amazing how the fires are the least important part of the end of the library.
I really lived my life thinking oh man, this fire. But it was once again humanity.
Yes.
And
and almost a sense that, the act of accumulating all of these texts doomed them.
Yeah. Oh.
Isn't that fascinating?
Just the irony of that.
Yes.
There's a poem in there
There's
somewhere.
so much irony in this story. I have just one little grouping of facts for you to end with.
Oh, love it.
Couple little pieces of legacy that I think are gonna blow your beautiful little mind.
Oh, you called it beautiful. I'm ready.
You are familiar, of course, with Amazon.
Like the delivery.
Yes.
Yes.
And you are familiar, of course, with its service called Alexa.
Yes.
Alexa was named in honor of the Library of Alexandria.
Oh my gosh! Because it had all the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yes.
shame. Jeff Bezos, you know, you're a shaky human being, but that's clever. I'll give you that.
And one last little fun thing.
Okay.
In 2002, this little company, this obscure business called Google,
Google?
set out on a mission
Yeah.
inspired by the story of the Library of Alexandria to digitize every book in print. And they had to stop at some point because of copyright claims and such. But they got about 25 million books in.
That's incredible.
So if you're familiar with, Google's mission to digitize all books, that was inspired by the Great Library. Yes.
They should have just gone to the ships, taken the books directly from them. That is incredible. What a story.
What a story.
What a story. And it's almost like you could write about the Library of Alexandria as a character. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Going back to the very beginning, it's no wonder that there are so many novels and works of fiction about the library.
Because I totally forgot about that. It so makes sense why so many people would rather write fiction, because she really is her own, entity almost.
Yeah.
That is... Oh, man, I really wish I could just go back and just see what it must have been like.
Yeah.
Because that's just magnificent. All those books, all those... Just the people involved is insane. Absolutely insane.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like all good things, they must come to an end. Just like this podcast episode. So...
What a segue.
Thank you. I'm trying to get better at this
Yeah.
thing. I feel like we're slowly getting better.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you guys for watching and joining us for another episode. It was so great to kind of venture into something a little different. So if you guys have any historical people or just events that you'd like us to discuss, drop them in the comments, or animals and nature and stuff like that.
Or even any questions, comments about our episode today, let us know. We'd love to hear it.
We would love to just engage in some discourse with you in the honor of the Library of Alexandria.
Yes.
Let's actually exchange knowledge and wisdom and questions in the comment section. I feel like that'd be cool.
As always, our cited sources are in the comments.
Yes.
Check them out if you want to learn more.
And we are on the social medias: Instagram, The Facts and the Curious; TikTok, The Facts and the Curious. You're right here on YouTube, The Facts and the Curious Official. And check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts at The Facts and the Curious. And please join us on every other Saturday for a new episode.
I heard there's a rumor that there's a Patreon.
That's true. We got a Patreon, so please go ahead and subscribe to our Patreon. Join our little membership. Join our classroom, guys. We want to be like the back of the classroom. You know what I mean? You know how it was rowdy, but also smart kids sat there? That's what we are. So join the classroom. Let's just have fun together. Bring your snacks. Eat them. Chill. Let's just have a blast. And we're really excited to share all of our cool adventures with you guys. So hit us up and we'll see you guys next time.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Good job, baby. And those Greek names were not as terrible. I feel like you did your best.
I did my best.